It's been 7 years since it happened, but I still can't shake it. Not completely. My girlfriend, Mara, and I had been on the trail for about 3 weeks when it happened. We'd started in Springer Mountain, Georgia, and were working our way north with plans to make it to Virginia if time allowed. We weren't in a rush. Just needed the escape. She'd just gotten out of a brutal corporate job, and I'd been stuck in some mindless sales gig I hated. This trip was to clear our heads. That day rain started around 2 p.m. Slow at first, then relentless. A cold, soaking downpour that made every mile feel like 5. The trail turned into a slurry of red mud and roots. My boots squelched with every step, and Mara's poncho kept getting snagged on branches. By the time we reached the old trail shelter, barely a cabin, really, we were both drenched, cold, and ready to collapse. The place looked like it hadn't been used in years. Weather-worn wood, one crooked door hanging off a single hinge, moss creeping up the sides. But it had a roof and walls, and after what we'd just hiked through, that was enough. We tossed our packs inside and tried to shake off the feeling that something was off. Inside, the place looked ransacked. Toothpaste was smeared in long blue streaks across the walls like someone had finger-painted with it. The mattress, if you could call it that, was ripped open, the stuffing gutted and tossed around like a raccoon had tried nesting in it. Someone had dumped what looked like trail mix and instant coffee all over the floor in a weird, almost deliberate pattern. In the far corner, there was a filthy handbag. Crusted with dirt, the zipper rusted shut. I don't know why, but Mara reached for it. Inside was a single expired driver's license. North Carolina, name I didn't recognize, face blurred. The corners were chewed. "I think we should leave," Mara said, and I didn't blame her. But it was getting dark, and the next shelter was 6 miles away. We were wet, freezing, and exhausted. There was a fireplace and a bit of dry wood stacked in the corner. I talked her into staying just one night. We'd clean up, get warm, and move on first thing in the morning. I started a fire. She tried to clear space on the floor, sweeping coffee grounds and peanuts aside with a stick. We even managed to find a dry spot to lay our sleeping pads. By the time we'd eaten a cold dinner and started to settle in, the rain had turned into a steady drumbeat on the roof. It could have been almost peaceful if not for that feeling crawling up my spine. That feeling you get when something's watching. Mara dropped her headlamp at some point. It rolled under the busted old bed frame. She got down on her hands and knees to reach for it, then froze. I'll never forget the sound she made. Not a scream, not even a full word. Just this sharp, breathless whimper, like something had punched the air out of her lungs. "What?" I asked. "What is it?" She didn't answer, just slowly started backing away, pale as snow, eyes wide and fixed under the bed. Then I heard it too. A groan, wet, low, and unnatural, like a dying animal choking on blood. But it wasn't an animal. It was a woman. I saw her fingers first, filthy, cracked nails. Then came her face. God, that face. She looked like something that had crawled up from a grave. Skin the color of ash, strung tight over bones. Hair matted into greasy ropes. Her eyes were sunk so deep into her skull, they barely looked human. And in her hands, shaking, twitching hands, was a rusted hunting knife. The other held a syringe, half full of yellowish fluid. She started screaming. Just sound. Gibberish. Moaning, shrieking, growling. Her whole body spasmed as she dragged herself out from under the bed, scraping her knees on the floorboards. She wasn't walking, wasn't standing, just hauling herself toward us on her elbows. Oh my God, we just ran from there. Didn't even grab our packs. Just bolted into the rain, into the dark woods, adrenaline making our legs move faster than they ever had. We didn't stop for miles. Just ran until we reached a ranger station around midnight, soaked to the bone, lungs burning, legs shaking. The ranger on duty was this older guy named Hal. I remember him staring at us as we stumbled in, mumbling about a woman under the bed with a knife. They sent 2 officers out with Hal, and we insisted on going with them far enough to point out the shelter from the trail, but not one step closer. When they returned a couple hours later, their faces were pale. She was still there, still under the bed, curled up, muttering to herself, gnawing on a granola bar she'd pulled from one of our packs. They said she'd been living in the crawl space beneath the cabin for at least a week, maybe more. Had a little nest of garbage and damp blankets under there. Officers found all sorts of weird things: chewed up batteries, empty propane canisters, stolen socks, a spoon blackened from flame. She'd been watching people, waiting until they left or fell asleep, then creeping out to steal what she needed. Sometimes she didn't even take anything, just moved things around, rearranged stuff. I still think about that. How long had she been watching us before she made a sound? What if Mara hadn't dropped her headlamp? What if we'd already fallen asleep? The trail changed for us after that. We kept hiking, made it to Virginia like we planned, but something was different. We started pitching our tent far off trail, deep in the woods where no one could follow easily. But even then, I'd lie awake sometimes, staring into the darkness, listening for the sound of something crawling beneath us. It was the summer of 1985, and I was stationed along the Rip Prep Trail in Shenandoah. That stretch of the Appalachian Trail doesn't get as much attention as some others. It's rugged, less trafficked, with steep switchbacks, boulder scrambles, and long, silent hollows where even the wind seems to hesitate. But back then, it had a reputation among us rangers. We didn't talk about it much in front of the tourists, but we knew the place had teeth. Mark Ellison was the hiker's name, though I only knew him briefly and not in person. A solo trekker, mid-30s, from California. Sacramento, I think. He'd checked in at the ranger station 2 weeks before the incident, clean-cut, polite, confident. He told one of our staff he was planning a 3-week loop between Rip Rap and Browns Gap, circling back through Black Rock and Doyle's River. That's real backcountry. Remote. But Mark wasn't green. He had a spotless logbook 2 years prior in Glacier Bay, weeks in Denali, even hiked the Bob Marshall Wilderness up in Montana. He knew how to move alone, how to leave no trace. You meet people like that sometimes, men who walk through the wild like they're stepping through their own memories. He signed the log at the trailhead with a pen, May 29, said he'd be back by the 18th of June. We didn't hear anything until the 16th, when a couple of us went on a routine patrol to check the water sources near Chimney Rock. That's when things got weird. It was early, maybe 9 a.m. A cold morning for June, the sky low and gunmetal gray. We were maybe a quarter-mile from the overlook, when Dave, another ranger, stopped dead in his tracks and pointed through the trees. What the hell is that doing there? Below the bluff, down near the creek bed, there was a tent badly pitched and slumped over like someone had tried to set it up drunk or in the dark. It was sitting on gravel, maybe 10 yards from the waterline, and it didn't make a lick of sense. That spot floods in heavy rain. No seasoned hiker would camp there. We hiked down and approached slow. The tent was mostly collapsed on one side, but not shredded or broken, just sagging. Gear was neatly arranged outside: cooking pot, fuel canister, dry bag, boots. A bear bag hung from a low branch nearby, perfectly tied and untouched. It was like someone had set up camp and then walked away mid-thought. Inside the tent we found Mark's journal, 6 entries. The last one dated June 13th. It ended mid-sentence. Fog came in strong today. Heard something moving outside last night. And then nothing. No period. Just the pen stroke trailing off the page. We radioed it in and secured the scene. A full search began within 24 hours. Here's the thing that still chills me. 40 years later, his food hadn't been touched. Not by raccoons, not by bears, not even by ants. It was like the woods had decided to leave it alone. The tent, the bag, the campo pristine, just empty. Over the next 3 days, we canvassed 5 square miles. We found his hat and a glove liner tucked into the brush, maybe a quarter-mile upstream. A few hours later, someone flagged us over to a narrow gully near the fire road. Inside were Mark's boots, both standing upright, side by side, toes pointing downhill like someone had stepped out of them and walked away barefoot. You ever try hiking barefoot through Appalachian underbrush? It's suicide. Razor-sharp rocks, thorn thickets, but we didn't find blood. No drag marks. No footprints. Nothing. We brought in dogs. They wouldn't track. One German shepherd, trained, reliable, veteran of 3 rescue ops, whined the minute we brought him near Mark's tent, then refused to step past the tree line. He lay down flat, tail tucked under, staring into the woods like it was watching him back. That night, we camped in shifts near the site. No one spoke much. The search continued for another week. Helicopters, mounted patrols, even a few volunteer search and rescue teams from out of state. We never found him. Not a body, not a scrap of fabric, not a single footprint. It was like the woods opened up and swallowed him whole. Eventually, we had to call it. Official report, Mark Ellison, presumed dead. Cause, unknown. Case remains open. But I don't buy it. People don't just vanish like that. You leave a trace. You scream. You fight. You bleed. There was none of that. Just a neat little camp, an unfinished sentence, and a trail that ends in silence. Years later, after I'd retired, I went back to that spot just once. Hoped maybe I could find some closure, but the forest felt wrong. I've talked to a few other rangers since then, people from Vermont, North Carolina, even a guy from New Hampshire. Every few years, someone goes missing under similar circumstances. Solo hiker, experienced, no sign of struggle. Sometimes it's on the trail, sometimes off, but it's always the same stories of disappearance. I don't know what happened to Mark Ellison. I don't know what he saw out there. What moved through his camp in the night? What left his boots standing like gravestones in a hollow no animal dares enter? But I do know this, the forest keeps its secrets. And some trails, once you walk them, don't let you come back. I still remember the day, though it happened over 3 decades ago in 1992. I was deep into my 2nd decade of serious hiking and had grown familiar with the Appalachian Trail, especially the rugged stretches in western North Carolina. The woods there near the Shining Rock Wilderness are some of the most beautiful and unforgiving in the whole trail system. If you've ever hiked through those ancient forests, you know the kind of silence and isolation that sinks into your bones. That's where this story begins and ends in a way none of us who were there could have imagined. Her name was Laura Collins. Laura wasn't just another weekend hiker. She was one of the toughest, most adventurous hikers I'd ever met. From Texas, originally, she'd thrown herself into the Appalachian Trail with a fierce passion, always chasing the next challenging section. I met her once at a trailhead store just weeks before the incident. She talked about her plans to hike a particularly remote stretch near the East Fork of the Pigeon River. She wanted solitude, she said, a place untouched by crowds or the buzz of civilization. She told me she was doing it solo, and I remember thinking how brave that was, especially in the deep woods of Shining Rock. The area is breathtaking but remote, with steep ridges, rocky paths, and little chance of help if something went wrong. I didn't see her again after that day, but the trail remembers her. It was an early spring morning. I was camped about 10 miles away, finishing some repairs on my gear. Word spread quickly that Laura had set out before dawn to take on that isolated section of the trail. But she never came back. Hours later, a group of hikers discovered her body near a small clearing not far from the river. The place was so remote that even getting there was tough, and the shock of the find sent waves through the local hiking community. I heard the whispers almost immediately. How could something like this happen out here, in these peaceful woods? The official investigation started quickly, but what they uncovered sent chills through everyone who knew the trail. You see, there was trailhead security footage, an unusual thing for the time, but a new ranger station near the parking lot had just installed a camera. It caught something no one expected. Hours before Laura began her hike, a figure appeared. Not just any figure, but someone dressed head to toe in tactical gear, black boots, gloves, helmet, the whole intimidating package. The person wasn't trying to hide. In fact, they seemed almost bored, pacing around, smashing signs and damaging equipment around the parking area. What's worse, the footage showed this figure entering the woods on the same path Laura would later take. It was clear someone was waiting or stalking, and despite the video, no one knew who it was. No arrests, no leads. I remember hearing about that footage and feeling a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Someone was out there, watching, waiting, and it was all caught on camera. The idea that this person could follow Laura's exact route without being seen was terrifying. We all know those woods, thick, dark, and perfect for hiding. Whoever it was knew the terrain. In the weeks later, the story grew darker. Hikers who passed through reported strange things, signs slashed, campfires doused, footprints that disappeared. There was a sense that something sinister was stalking the trail, and it wasn't just Laura's killer. People started avoiding the section near the East Fork, especially at dawn and dusk, when the forest's shadows grow long and heavy. The ranger station tried to increase patrols, but the vastness of the wilderness made it nearly impossible to cover every inch. I can't forget the fear we all felt that spring. Hiking had always been about freedom and peace for me, but suddenly the trail felt like a trap. I started hiking with others or avoided that part of the trail altogether. And then there was Laura. She was gone, but her story haunted us all. The fact that her killer walked free, still unknown, was a reminder that the woods weren't always safe. The Appalachian Trail is beautiful, sure, but it's wild, and sometimes that wild hides a darkness that no one is prepared for. I still remember the figure on that footage, the silent shadow who followed her into the woods and vanished. If you ever find yourself hiking those remote sections, keep your eyes open. The woods can hold secrets. I thought I was prepared. 24 years old, years of hiking experience tucked under my belt, and a heart full of restless ambition. My name is Maris Caldwell, and in the spring of 1989, I set out on what I thought would be a transformative journey, a solo trek of 43 miles along the Appalachian Trail. I wanted to lose myself in the wilderness, to find some sort of peace I'd never quite grasped in the noisy chaos of city life. What I didn't expect was to lose more than just myself. I lost control, direction, and nearly my sanity. The first day was deceptively calm. The sky stretched wide and blue above me. The trail wound gently through thick forests, and my pack, though heavy, felt manageable. I remember glancing at my map, confident I could make it to the next checkpoint by nightfall. Somewhere around the 12-mile mark, as the sun began to dip, I felt it, the prickling of eyes on the back of my neck, a weight pressing on the air around me that wasn't natural. I spun around. There, just beyond the tree line, I caught the faintest silhouette of a man. He didn't move much, just stood in the shadows, watching.
I blinked, and he was gone.
I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a hunter or another hiker, but a chill curled deep in my chest. Night came faster than I expected. I set up camp just off the trail, my back against a large oak tree. I built a small fire and ate a meager dinner from my pack, but every crackle of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my heart slam in my throat. That first night I heard it. Soft footsteps, not the quick patter of a squirrel or the rustling of a raccoon, but heavy, deliberate steps circling just outside the firelight. Then came low, guttural grunts, deep, rough, and chilling. It sounded almost human, but twisted, animalistic. I froze, clutching my knife, whispering prayers I didn't believe in. The sounds circled, stopped, then retreated. The days blurred together. I pushed forward, but soon realized I had taken a wrong turn. My supplies dwindled faster than I had anticipated, and the trail markers became scarce. I was lost. By the third day, I was 15 miles in, deep in the wilderness, with no clear path out. The presence followed me relentlessly. Footsteps echoed just beyond my vision. At times, I caught glimpses through the trees of something large and hulking, a shadow that moved with unnatural speed and silence. Once, I heard it mimic my breathing, shallow, ragged, like it was right behind me, though no one was there. I screamed into the void one night, hoping anyone would hear. But on the fifth day, dehydration set in. My mouth was raw, my throat a furnace. My legs ached and trembled beneath me. I tried to ration the small water I had left, but it was nowhere near enough. I huddled in my tent, trying to keep warm, and the grunting grew louder. Closer. There was a presence outside, watching, breathing. And I swear, at one point, I saw glowing eyes piercing through the darkness, just beyond the firelight's reach. My mind was unraveling. I couldn't tell if what I saw was real or hallucination. The footsteps sometimes grew so close, I could swear I felt hot breath on my neck. The grunting shifted, sometimes angry, sometimes almost mocking. I had no choice but to run. I scrambled blindly through the forest, branches slapping my face, roots trying to trip me. I pushed myself harder than I ever thought possible, covering miles uphill through rugged terrain. By the end of that day, I had somehow covered nearly 8 miles. But I was spent, trembling, and utterly alone. Weeks passed. I had no idea how long I'd been wandering. Food was non-existent, and my water supply was gone. I drank from muddy puddles, risking sickness just to survive. The presence never left. One night, exhausted beyond belief, I collapsed near a stream. I thought maybe death would take me quietly. Eventually, rescuers found me, days after I should have died. I was dehydrated, delirious, but alive. When they asked what happened, I could barely speak. I told them about the man in the woods, the footsteps, the grunting, the glowing eyes. Some said it was mental breakdown, stress-induced hallucinations. Others whispered about wild men, feral, human-like creatures said to haunt the Appalachian wilderness. I don't know what I saw. I don't know what chased me. But I know the fear was real. Too real. And somewhere out there, in those dense woods, something waits. Since then, I've never been back, especially not to the deeper sections of the trail in the Appalachians.